It's no secret that in the world of hip-hop, some labels manage not only to become globally famous, but also to directly embody the era they represent. Some of them succeed in forever changing the trends and habits of fans, and even the world of hip-hop as a whole. The label we're discussing today became known not only for its talented artists and outstanding producers, but also for a series of tragic events that left a bloody mark in its history. Many of you have probably guessed that we're talking about Death Row Records. The story of this legendary label resembles a gripping detective novel filled with suspicious and dangerous events. Death Row Records became the symbol of gangsta rap and dominated the international market. The label was not only a source of legendary records, but also of an entire lifestyle. The music that emerged in the distant 1990s on the outskirts of Compton became the catalyst for global changes, not only in the rap game, but also in political expressions. This is the story of the bloodiest label in the history of music, Death Row Records. Sit back, we're about to begin. By 1987, rap and hip-hop were already on the rise, but the gangster rap genre was in its early stages. At this time, two key figures of the future Death Row Records were actively working on their careers. Suge Knight, whose real name is Marion Hugh Knight Jr., was a former football player before switching to the music business after a failed sports career. He would later become known as one of the scariest figures in hip-hop history, weighing over 160 kilograms, 350 pounds. Notably, he started his career as a bodyguard. In 1989, Suge Knight founded his own artist management company, working with various performers, including Vanilla Ice, which would later cause numerous disputes and conflicts. It was during this time that Suge Knight began working as a bodyguard and organizer in the music industry. Dr. Dre, Andre Young was already famous for his role in the group NWA, which laid the foundation for gangsta rap. Their 1988 album Straight Outta Compton drew attention to the problems of black ghettos and was a powerful statement against social inequality and police brutality. The music ignored radio censorship and connected with the streets. Critics' cries of immorality were drowned out by lyrics depicting violence, drugs, sex, and police brutality in South Central, all while selling hundreds of thousands of records. As head of production at Ruthless Records, Dr. Dre produced many successful projects. However, he soon began to feel underappreciated, dissatisfied with the many difficult performances and projects he had to manage. Feeling underpaid, Dr. Dre became increasingly disillusioned with Ruthless Records. After Ice Cube left in 1989 due to financial disputes, Suge Knight and the D.O.C. reviewed all the financial records with lawyers. Convinced of the dishonesty of Jerry Heller and Eazy-E, they approached Dr. Dre with the idea of starting a label, far from Heller and Eazy-E. Allegedly using physical intimidation, Suge Knight managed to secure contracts from Eazy-E for the D.O.C., Dr. Dre, Jewel, and Michello. Dr. Dre and Suge Knight, along with their partners the D.O.C. and Dick Griffey, set about creating a record label and music partnership in preparation for Dre's departure from Ruthless Records. Initially, the new venture was called Future Shock. However, the D.O.C. and Michael Harris suggested a new name, Death Row, but the rights to that name belonged to Unknown DJ, a former music partner of Dr. Dre in the 1980s. Unknown stated in an interview that he had come up with the name Death Row for a potential deal with Morgan Creek to create another record label. However, in July 1991, he sold the rights to the name to Dr. Dre and his partners, and by 1992, the name had officially changed to Death Row Records. The logo of Death Row depicts a blindfolded man strapped to an electric chair at the moment of execution, symbolizing the violent death embraced by many gangsta rappers, not just the commercialization of rap music. Death Row Records became a counterweight to Bad Boy Entertainment, created by Sean Combs, better known as Puff Daddy or Diddy. This rivalry eventually escalated into a bloody East Coast versus West Coast feud. With the help of David Kenner, Suge Knight began signing young artists from the inner cities of California and arranged for them to contribute to the soundtrack of the 1992 film Deep Cover. The single Deep Cover marked Dr. Dre's debut as a solo artist, and his protege, Snoop Dogg, emerged as a rising star.
So it's difficult to get it, but I got the hookup with somebody who knows how to get in contact.
The period from 1991 to 1992 was a time of grand success for Death Row. Their first major project, The Chronic by Dr. Dre, became a milestone in the music industry. Released in December 1992, The Chronic marked a new era in the development of gangsta rap. The album not only advanced the G-Funk sound, but also launched Snoop Dogg's career, along with other artists signed to the label. It was a massive success, reaching the top 3 of the US Billboard chart, selling 5.7 million records worldwide and going multi-platinum. Tracks like Nothing But a G-Thang and Let Me Ride became hits, solidifying Death Row's place in the music industry. The Chronic not only achieved commercial success, but also set the sonic and visual style of the label for years to come, resonating with youth across America through its focus on street culture and life in the ghettos. During this time, the label began signing new artists like Daz Dillinger and Kurupt, who became part of the group Tha Dog Pound. By the end of 1992, Death Row Records had become a dominant force in West Coast hip-hop and gangsta rap. Its strategy of promoting conflict and street culture amplified the label's image and aesthetic. Even at that time, Death Row had become a cultural phenomenon. Suge Knight's aggressive business tactics and association with criminal elements only boosted the label's popularity in certain circles. A professional alliance with Interscope Records further benefited Death Row. Although Interscope was on the verge of bankruptcy, their gamble on Death Row paid off, becoming its distributor, which opened doors for more funding and wider music distribution. In 1993, Death Row released Snoop Dogg's debut album Doggy Style, which was even more successful than The Chronic. Doggy Style was hailed as one of the most anticipated albums in rap history, and it did not disappoint. It debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200 chart, becoming the first album in history to debut at the top spot in its first week of sales. Hits like Gin and Juice, What's My Name, and Murder Was the Case made Snoop Dogg an international star. Shortly after the album's release, Snoop Dogg was charged with murder, fueling the debates that politician C. Dolores Tucker and vice presidential candidate Dan Quayle sparked by criticizing gangsta rap for contradicting American values, degrading black women, and encouraging violence against police officers. Although 1994 was a successful year in terms of sales and influence, it also became a time of significant problems for Death Row. During this period, the label began facing various internal and external conflicts. Death Row encountered numerous arrests and lawsuits that involved both the label's leadership and its artists. Suge Knight, known for his tough business methods, was often accused of extortion and threats. Tensions between Dr. Dre and Suge Knight gradually escalated. Dr. Dre was increasingly dissatisfied with the criminal elements surrounding Death Row, while Suge Knight actively integrated street culture and individuals connected with crime into the label's business model. In 1994, a rivalry began to form between Death Row and the Bad Boy Records label, which represented the East Coast of the United States. The key figures in this conflict were Suge Knight and Puff Daddy, the head of Bad Boy, along with the label's artists, 2P, who would soon join Death Row, and Notorious B.I.G. from the East Coast. 1995 became a decisive year for Death Row Records when 2PAC joined the label. Tupac was one of the most controversial and influential figures in hip-hop at the time. In September 1995, while imprisoned on sexual assault charges, 2PAC signed a contract with Death Row after Suge Knight paid his $1.4 million bail. This became a turning point for the label.
You know what? I bet you got it twisted, you don't know who to trust, so many.
In December 1995, Tupac began working on his double album, All Eyes on Me, which was released in early 1996 and became one of the most successful albums in hip-hop history. The album featured guest appearances by Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, Redman, Method Man, Nate Dogg, and others. It was the last studio album released during 2P's lifetime and was significantly different from his previous work as it fully embraced gangsta rap. The album's title was changed from Euthanasia to All Eyes on Me during the recording process. Here's what Shakur said about the album's title. Everyone's looking at me right now. The police are looking at me, women, my enemies, reporters, people who want to see me fall, people who want to see me survive, my mom, the guards in prison. Everyone is looking at me, all eyes on me. It became clear that Suge Knight hadn't bailed out a future gangsta rap legend in vain. The album was nominated for numerous awards, including Grammys and American Music Awards. Critics praised the album, though some accused it of self-justification and excessive use of gangster slang.
Now let me welcome everybody to the Wild Wild West, a state that's untouchable like...
During this period, Tupac and Death Row became central figures in the escalating East Coast versus West Coast feud, which further increased the label's popularity, but also heightened tensions and conflicts. By the end of 1995 and the beginning of 1996, Death Row Records was at the height of its success, but it was clear that new challenges lay ahead. At the second annual Source Awards, Suge Knight, known for his strong-arm tactics, after briefly expressing support for 2P, publicly humiliated Puff Daddy, the boss of Bad Boy Records, who was leading the New York rap scene and was Death Row's main competitor. Suge Knight criticized Diddy for constantly improvising in his artists' music and making endless cameo appearances in their music videos. Then, Suge Knight invited artists seeking more personal attention to join Death Row.
First of all, I'd like to thank God. Second of all, I'd like to thank my whole entire Death Row family on both sides, you know what I'm saying? I'd like to tell Tupac to keep his guards up. We ride with him. And one other thing I'd like to say, any artist out there want to be an artist and want to stay a star, and don't want to have to worry about the executive producer trying to be all in the videos, all on the record. dancing. Come to Death Row.
A rivalry quickly flared up among fans of the two major rap scenes in America. On September 24, 1995, at a birthday party for Jermaine Dupri at the Platinum House nightclub in Atlanta, Georgia, Bad Boy Records associates got into a heated argument with Suge Knight and his friend Big Jake, a member of the Campanella Park Piru Bloods gang and a death row bodyguard. Witnesses, including a Fulton County sheriff working security at the nightclub, reported that Puff was fiercely arguing with Suge Knight inside the club. Minutes later, outside the club, Puff's childhood friend and bodyguard Anthony Jones got into a heated altercation, which ended with him being fatally shot as he was getting into a limousine. Diddy and Jones's lawyers denied any involvement, and Diddy's attorney added that he wasn't even with his bodyguard that night. More than 20 years later, the case remains officially unsolved. Previously, Death Row had presented a united front of artists, but it now began to split into separate factions. Daz, now the lead producer, was working on Snoop Dogg's second album, Tha Dogfather, featuring Badass and Techniek from the LBC Crew, Warren G, Nate Dogg from 213, and Tha Dog Pound. Tupac was actively working in the studio with Herd M Bad and Big D, creating the Don Illuminati, the 7-Day Theory. Unlike All Eyes on Me, this album lacked major guest appearances from Death Row artists and had a much darker tone. However, the artist didn't live to see its release.
I bet you got it twisted, you don't know who to trust. So many player-hating niggas trying to sound like us.
The murder of 2PAC became one of the most mysterious and discussed events in the world of hip-hop, occurring on September 13, 1996. The circumstances surrounding his death still spark numerous theories and debates. On September 7, 1996, 2PAC attended a boxing match between Mike Tyson and Bruce Seldon at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Tupac and Mike were good friends, and the artist actively supported the boxer at his matches. It took Tyson 109 seconds to win back the WBA belt. This was Tyson's 45th victory, his 39th knockout, and one of his easiest fights. After the fight, Tupac, along with Suge Knight and their entourage, headed to the exit. In the hotel lobby, Tupac got into a fight with a man named Orlando Anderson, who was allegedly a member of the Southern California street gang Crips. This altercation became one of the key events that many believe led to subsequent incidents.
In jail, and according to some police reports, lead to Tupac being shot less than 3 hours later.
At around 11 p.m., Tupac and Suge Knight got into a black BMW and headed to a Death Row hosted party at Club 662. The club was owned by Suge Knight, and local DJs recalled that Tupac disliked it when they played music from the other coast. On the way, their car stopped at a red light at the intersection of Flamingo Boulevard and Koval Street. A white Cadillac pulled up next to them, and one of its passengers opened fire, shooting multiple times. Tupac was hit 4 times. Twice in the chest, once in the arm, and once in the thigh. Suge Knight sustained only minor injuries from glass fragments. After the attack, 2PAC was rushed to the hospital, where he was placed in a medically induced coma and underwent several surgeries. 6 days later, on September 13, 1996, 2PAC died from cardiac arrest caused by complications from his wounds. Despite numerous rumors, the identity of the specific perpetrators was never officially confirmed. Las Vegas police couldn't find clear evidence, and the case remained open for many years. The silence of witnesses and fear of repercussions also hindered the investigation. The most common theory is that 2P's murder was connected to a fight that took place at the MGM Hotel. It is believed that Orlando Anderson, a member of the Crips gang, may have organized the attack in retaliation. Although police questioned Anderson, he denied any involvement and was killed in another shooting in 1998. Tupac's death was a massive loss to the music world. He was not only one of the most talented and influential rappers, but also a social activist, actor, and poet. His murder intensified tensions between the East Coast and West Coast rap scenes, which were already in conflict during the 1990s. Shortly after, on March 9, 1997, Notorious B.I.G. was shot and killed, sparking rumors of a connection between the two murders. Tupac's murder remains an unsolved mystery, leaving a deep mark on the history of hip-hop and popular culture. Tupac was a key figure at the label, and his death in 1996 deprived Death Row of one of its most successful and popular artists. After his death, sales began to decline, and trust in the label waned. In the documentary Tupac Shakur Before I Wake, Tupac's bodyguard and writer Kathy Scott suggested that Suge Knight didn't take the seat that bullets went through because he knew about the attack and from which side the shots would come. The label's owner, Suge Knight, was arrested in October 1996 for violating probation terms related to his involvement in the fight the night before 2PAC's murder. In 1997, he was sentenced to 9 years in prison. Suge Knight's arrest was critical for the label's management as he was the driving force and authority keeping the company together. Without his leadership and presence, the label began to lose control. Suge Knight was not just a businessman. He kept artists and staff under strict control, using his reputation as a powerful figure in street circles. After Suge Knight's arrest and Tupac's death, Death Row began experiencing internal conflicts. artists started leaving the label. Dr. Dre had already left in 1996 to start the successful Aftermath Entertainment, and Snoop Dogg left Death Row in 1998, expressing dissatisfaction with working conditions and internal disputes. Snoop Dogg signed with No Limit Records, and his departure further weakened Death Row. The label became entangled in numerous lawsuits related to contract violations, royalties, and copyright issues. For instance, 2PAC's family sued the label for unpaid royalties. While Suge Knight was imprisoned, the label released albums like Represents, Chronic 2000, and Too Gangsta for Radio, both receiving negative reviews. These albums were released by new signees Ta Realist and YGD Ta Top Dog, who were criticized for imitating the styles, appearances, and vocals of 2P and Snoop Dogg. Additionally, Dead Man Walkin', a compilation of unreleased Snoop Dogg tracks, was released without his consent. These issues significantly impacted the label's financial standing. As debts accumulated and legal expenses grew, Death Row lost the ability to function properly. The label was also notorious for its connections to gangster circles, which was one of the reasons for its internal instability. Suge Knight and other Death Row representatives had close ties to street gangs, creating an atmosphere of fear and violence, which alienated potential partners and investors. The press and the public began associating the label with criminal activities, which also affected its image and popularity. After Dr. Dre, Snoop Dogg, and Tupac's departure, the label failed to attract new artists who could replicate the success of their predecessors. By the late 90s and early 2000s, Death Row tried to promote new performers, but their albums didn't achieve the same commercial success. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, musical trends in hip-hop began to change, and Death Row failed to adapt to these changes. New labels like Aftermath and Rockefeller Records began to dominate the industry, creating a modern sound. Thus, the period from 1996 to 2001 marked a sharp decline in Death Row Records' influence in the industry, caused by Tupac's murder, Suge Knight's imprisonment, and internal conflicts among artists and management. In 2002, Suge Knight was released from prison after serving 5 years for violating probation. However, his reputation and influence in the industry had noticeably weakened. Suge Knight tried to keep the label active by releasing albums of previously unreleased material, as well as reissues of old hits. Among such releases were albums like Until the End of Time and Better Days, featuring posthumous recordings of 2PAC. However, none of these albums managed to restore Death Row's former glory. In 2006, Death Row released an album called Pac's Life, which included previously unreleased tracks by 2PAC. Although it attracted fans' attention, the release didn't become a significant event in the music industry. In 2006, legal and financial problems reached their peak. The label was forced to file for bankruptcy, and its assets, including master recordings and music rights, were put up for sale. On January 15, 2009, Death Row Records was successfully sold at auction for $18 million to the Ontario-based company Wide Awake Entertainment Group, founded in 2008 by Lara Lavi with funding from New Solutions Financial Corporation. On January 25, 2009, a public auction was held for everything found in the Death Row office after the company filed for bankruptcy. Notably, an electric Death Row chair was sold for $2,500. Lavi was fired from Wide Awake, and Robert Thompson from New Solutions took over daily operations. Lavi later sued her former company Wide Awake, as well as New Solutions and Thompson So in New York County Court on November 19, 2009. Wide Awake released previously unreleased material by artists like Corrupt, Danny Boy, Crooked Eye, and the LBC Crew. The album The Chronic Relit was released on September 1, 2009, featuring a remastered Chronic album with 7 unreleased songs featuring Snoop Dogg, Corrupt, and a bonus DVD with interviews from Dr. Dre, a mini-movie with Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg, and a TV ad for the original The Chronic. On August 23, 2019, American toy company Hasbro announced its acquisition of E1 for $4 billion, making them owners of Death Row Records. However, in April 2021, Hasbro and Entertainment One announced the sale of E1 Music to Blackstone Group, which was completed in June 2021. On February 9, 2022, ahead of his next album release and Super Bowl halftime performance, Snoop Dogg announced that he would acquire the Death Row Records trademarks. The sale initially didn't include the label's catalog rights, but it was reported that he was close to a deal to acquire his and other Death Row artists' catalogs. On February 11, 2022, Snoop Dogg released his third studio album on Death Row Records, marking a 26-year break since his Dogfather album. Snoop Dogg's acquisition of Death Row Records initially didn't include the rights to 2P or Dr. Dre's albums, as those rights had been returned to Interscope Records. On March 4, 2022, in an interview with Tidal, Snoop Dogg claimed he had acquired rights to all albums previously released on Death Row Records, including his debut studio album Doggy Style and The Chronic. However, Dr. Dre's lawyer Howard King refuted these false reports 2 days later, stating that Dr. Dre still retains full control of The Chronic, which returned to streaming services in February 2023. On April 18, 2022, it was announced that Death Row Records would launch its own streaming service, offering higher royalties to its artists than major music streaming services. In December 2022, Snoop Dogg sold a share in the Death Row catalog to the music label Gamma, founded by former Apple Music Global creative director Larry Jackson. On February 12, 2023, Snoop Dogg announced that the Death Row catalog would return to TikTok through a partnership with the music distribution company Sound On. The Death Row catalog returned to all music streaming services on March 9, 2023. But what has happened to the once legendary Suge Knight during this time? On May 10, 2008, Suge Knight was beaten outside a Hollywood nightclub over a financial dispute. He was assaulted for 3 minutes and was taken to the hospital, reportedly not cooperating with the police. On August 27, 2008, Suge Knight was arrested for drug possession and charged with aggravated assault after visiting a Las Vegas strip club. When the police arrived, Suge Knight was beating his girlfriend and brandishing a knife. Reports also stated that he was under the influence of heavy substances. However, no new charges were filed against him. By December 5th, all charges were dropped. Suge Knight's attorney David Chesnoff explained that the prosecution had disclosure and witness issues. Prosecutor Susan Benedict declined to comment. When asked about the favorable outcome, Knight responded, "God is merciful. Happy holidays." As part of a bankruptcy claim, on October 30th, 2008, Suge Knight also filed a lawsuit against Kanye West and his associates. The case related to a shooting that occurred in August 2005 at a Kanye West party before the Video Music Awards, where Knight was shot in the leg. The lawsuit sought compensation for emotional and physical harm caused by the shooting, medical expenses, lost income, and the theft of a $147,000 diamond earring. In January 2015, Suge Knight was arrested again. Reports indicated that on January 29th, at around 3 p.m. local time, he ran over 2 men in a pickup truck. On that day, Ice Cube and Dr. Dre were filming a commercial for Straight Outta Compton, the highly anticipated film about NWA, the original hip-hop group that brought the two stars together 30 years ago in Compton, California. Suge Knight, the 49-year-old music mogul whose legacy is as brutal as the gangster rap that his Death Row Records helped popularize, was not allowed on set. One of the victims later died in the hospital, while the other survived but sustained injuries. The deceased was Terry Carter, co-founder of Heavyweight Records and a friend of Suge Knight. The second victim was Clee Bone Sloan, a director. According to witnesses, they pulled into a nearby fast food restaurant and got into a dispute. At some point, the argument escalated, and police say that Knight got into his truck and ran them over. On Friday morning, Suge Knight turned himself in at a Los Angeles police station where he was taken into custody. It sounded like another dirty chapter in Suge Knight's life, where gang violence and the entertainment industry's ego collided with unforeseen consequences. However, according to several people familiar with the situation, the episode may have been an accident. Knight was reportedly attacked by a third person in the burger stand parking lot and was too weak to fight back. He attempted to flee the scene, not only hitting his aggressor but also running over Carter in the process. On September 21, 2018, Suge Knight was sentenced to 28 years in prison. The former Death Row head pleaded no contest to voluntary manslaughter, earning him a 22-year prison sentence. An additional 6 years were added due to California's 3 strikes law, which mandates longer prison terms for individuals convicted of 3 serious offenses. It is known that Suge Knight has 5 children: Taj, Arion, Jacob, Sosa, and Bailey. Suge Knight could have left a more positive legacy in the music industry, but his choices and actions led to the downfall of his career and diminished his influence. His heavy-handed approach not only destroyed his career, but also the most legendary label in hip-hop history, making it infamous for its violent reputation. At one point, Suge Knight lost everything: friends, label colleagues, the label itself, and all of his investors. It seems that while his aggressive character may have helped solve some problems quickly, it ultimately exacerbated his downfall as a producer. Look at Dr. Dre. By leaving the label in time, he built an excellent business career and achieved phenomenal success. One of the world's most popular headphones is even named after him. Meanwhile, Snoop Dogg also left the label shortly before the tragic events, and in comparison to the endlessly conflicted Suge Knight, his career has thrived. Snoop Dogg has maintained his relevance and recently even bought back Death Row. Now Suge Knight is serving a long sentence, while his former colleagues live luxurious lives, likely not thinking about the wild adventures of their youth when they worked under the great and fearsome Suge Knight. And that's all for today. Subscribe to the channel, put likes and leave comments under this video. Bye everybody!